Global markets are celebrating the progress made by the U.S. and China. U.S. markets hit yet more record highs. The Dow trading well over 47,000. The S&P jumped a little over 1%. Tech stocks once again rose sharply. Strong gains as well in Asia. The Hang Seng and Shanghai Composite both rose more than 1%. Japan's Nikkei average surged more than 2% on Monday. Gold, a traditional safe haven, that fell sharply, a sign investors are feeling less worried. Still, concerns remain, with Trump increasing tariffs on its neighbor, Canada, by 10%. Joining me now, Mary Lovely, senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Okay, so when you break down what we know, is this a truce, a trade truce between the U.S. and China, or something bigger than that?
Great question, Jim. I would say it's a setting down of arms, at least for, but not armament. Both sides, as you mentioned earlier, for example, the Chinese, their export controls are being deferred. The U.S., of course, keeps in place its export controls. We still have the possibility of more tariffs. President Trump and U.S. Trade Rep Greer have already queued up a new Section 301, so-called export crowbar case against China for its failure to meet the terms of the Phase 1 deal. So, there's still a lot of firepower standing at the ready.
I wonder who you think gained more out of this. I mean, when you look, for instance, soybean sales, okay, that'll be a relief for U.S. farmers, but China was buying soybeans before. It just stopped in the midst of this trade war. So to some degree, it's returning to the status quo. Who gained the most out of this back and forth?
Yeah, I think in some sense the U.S. blinked. We are back to a status quo. China is reverting back to purchases it already made. When we think back to kind of the systemic or structural issues that the U.S. wanted the Chinese to address, things like industrial subsidies, reviving their own domestic demand, opening up their markets to U.S. exports more. We haven't seen any of those outside of agriculture, really. So I think, the harder systemic issues still remain on the table. And not only that, China has gotten the U.S. basically to push them even farther, away.
How about on that big goal of Trump's tariffs as relate to China, which is to bring the manufacturing that takes place in China to the U.S.? I know there's already been a lot of measures of this that hasn't shown much from any countries, right, returning to the U.S., given higher labor costs here. But did any manufacturing of goods leave China and return to the U.S. or on the way back to the U.S. as a result of this nearly year-long trade war?
Well, I wouldn't want to say there's none, because usually there is some counter example out there, but certainly nothing that can be picked up in the aggregate statistics. Manufacturing has left China, but it's gone to places like Vietnam. And those countries are now emerging as kind of middlemen. That doesn't mean that nothing's happening inside those countries. There is a lot happening. Chinese firms are investing. Vietnamese workers, Thai workers, Cambodian workers are being employed. They're making things that are being sent to the United States. We've seen that because, our reliance on China went from about over 20% of our exports to closer to 10. So we're seeing a big fall off in exports directly from China. That doesn't mean that Chinese value added is not still in most of those products.
And how about the final word now on TikTok here? You now have American investors owning a majority stake, but ByteDance, the parent company, still owns 20%. I mean, the key issue was meant to be a national security issue, and that was the subject of the bipartisan legislation that required a sale. Has that issue been solved?
It has been, I think, solved perhaps for this administration. Obviously, people who think that there isn't a way around this, security risk posed by deeper integration of Chinese tech into U.S. tech will not be happy with this solution. But I think for the Chinese, they see it as perhaps a signal of how their investments in the U.S. could be structured in the future. This is something that they would really like as they're moving forward. Not only EVs to the economy is actually a rather small share. The Chinese see their future in AI plus, that is in providing the robots that will be guided by AI, for example, and the equipment. And the U.S. would certainly be a market for that. But that requires some kind of agreement on how security risks from that sort of integration would be handled. And this TikTok deal may provide some glimmers of hope for them.
Mary Lovely, good to have you on. Thanks so much for joining.